Hi everybody, sanibonani, welcome to my channel. Igama lami Ntando Mdletshe, and on this channel siyasibuka ama reality shows to alla eMzansi bese siza la sokhuluma ngawo lama shows, senze ama reviews or ama recaps. If it's your first time joining me today and you really like my content, ungakhohlwa ukuthi press the subscribe button la ngezansi kanye ne notification bell ukuze phela uthole umyalezo uma ngabe umsebenzi omusha sesi ufakile. Guys, today I want to talk a little bit more about Ntando Nesithembu. I am going to focus on the issues surrounding the passing of unkosikazi MaSaule, the second wife that we have never met, because by the time we were introduced to this family in season 1, she had already passed, which is MaSaule, you guys. And I am going to focus a little bit more on the relationship that MaSaule possibly had with MaCele and the reasons why, the possible reasons why they had such conflicts, you guys, between the two of them. When the show was introduced, you guys, I think in season 1 there was not really a mention of MaSaule at the time, but in season 2, the beginning of the show, I guess they soon realized every season they were going to have something new, you know, to make their storylines more interesting. And that was when really we got to know that there was another wife, MaSaule, that had passed, you guys. And so for me, this season, when they started talking about Ulungelo, of course we have memories of how they have spoken about MaSaule on the show, but I think the most surprising thing for me and for some of us is just the fact that they had never mentioned the fact that MaSaule had a son. And for them to mention that this season, it was surprising, it was shocking, but also it was a little bit suspicious, because we started thinking about why they would choose to mention Ulungelo only this season. What would be the reason for that? And also, even if they didn't mention him on the show, it didn't sound like they had kept in contact with him. What were those reasons? And it makes you think a lot about Umawake. It makes you think a lot about MaSaule. We do know that this family has had an episode where Umakhumalo noma Ngwabe kanye naye ubaba MaSaule have gone to the grave sites kaMaSaule, but what we know is that at that time they were able to go to the grave sites, but even in that moment there was no mention of the son. And if you do the calculations, you guys, Ulungelo has been an adult for the whole lifetime of the show, so they could never use the excuse maybe ubesayingane, so they couldn't have mentioned him on the show, because he has been the adult ever since the show has begun, you guys. So there's a lot of questions, you guys, that arise with the storyline Sika Lungelo. Also, just the fact that MaCele, who is the person that MaSaule goes to with a lot of decisions that he has to make, if he's making a move, he always feels like he has to speak to MaCele first. But for this one, which has to do with MaSaule and which has to do with Ulungelo, it doesn't seem to be that way. However, you guys, if you do go back to, I think it's episode 3 of season 2, where he introduces MaSaule to us, Ubaba MaSaule, we soon realized in that season that there were issues between MaCele kanye MaSaule. Okay, I think the most difficult thing for me to understand MaCele was how she is still upset about something when it comes to MaSaule. I don't know if I can say she hates MaSaule, but obviously when you have an issue with somebody and they pass, a lot of the times people are able to let go of that issue, and they will say rest in peace to that person, and they will be able to move on with their life. That is something that MaCele has not been able to do. The mere mention of MaSaule to MaCele changes her mood, you know, which means that there's something big that happened between Yena and MaSaule. So I wanted to go back and see what's kwenzekani. I was having a conversation with one of my viewers on WhatsApp who was also saying the same thing, talking about the fact that she has also been wondering ukuthi kahle kahle yini le nkulu kangaka that happened between MaSaule kanye naye MaCele. And a lot of the things that she brought up in our chat made me actually go back and watch that season when MaSaule was actually mentioned. You guys, we had such a great conversation on WhatsApp, and so I went and I watched the episode. So I want us guys to go back to that time when MaSaule was introduced, because looking back now, it's very interesting to look at how MaSaule introduces MaSaule, explains his relationship with MaSaule. Not only does it explain and gives us a little bit of knowledge and information about MaSaule, but it also gives us a little bit of information about a relationship MaCele kanye noMaSaule, and it gives us an idea on of why MaCele has such a problem with MaSaule. Guys, to have a problem with somebody beyond the grave, to be upset about somebody that has already passed, like they can never really impact your life again, but you're still upset at them, there must be something big. Of course, the things I'm going to talk about here are things that are revealed on the show, and some of the things are the assumptions that people have made because they have seen how MaCele just doesn't have any positive feelings when it comes to MaSaule. And so some of the things are assumptions, some of the things are just opinions based on what we saw on the show, but there's probably other things, you guys, that we don't know, because MaSaule, they seem to limit us in terms of how much they reveal in terms of their lives, you know. So the introduction, the episode that actually introduced MaSaule to the show by Mdletshe. On that episode, Mdletshe was sitting with the photos. It's like he has a photo album with the photos of MaSaule, like a whole lot of photos of MaSaule. So he's sitting down with this album looking at it, and there was a scene, honestly, that it looks like it was just a scene that was supposed to explain to us who MaSaule is. At the time, you guys, before we even knew that MaSaule had a son, and also at the time, remember, we never really understood the fact that Mdletshe, at some point, he wasn't married to all of his wives, but he was calling them his wife. So I felt like he just wanted us, or he wanted them to not forget about MaSaule. So he didn't want to feel like he is moving forward with his family, with the show premiering and them getting famous and known now, and he was feeling like somehow they are leaving in memory MaSaule behind. So he wanted to bring her along to the show, which was seemed like it would have been really a nice gesture to do, except at the time we did not know that it just would have just made sense even at that time for them to introduce us to the idea that this woman that was so important to them, that they loved so much, some of them had a son, but they made a decision not to give us that information at the time. So this is what Mdletshe says in introducing MaSaule. He says, MaSaule is my wife, whom I married around the same time as MaCele. He describes the relationship yakhe noMaSaule as he always describes a relationship yakhe noMakhumalo kanye noMangwabe, because he always says uMangwabe noMakhumalo are like twins in marriage wakamSeleko, umshadweni wakamSeleko. He says the same about uMaCele kanye noMaSaule. He was with them as intombi at the same time. He does not say where Umayeni was at the time, because remember guys, they always say Umayeni is the one that was met by MaSaule first, so they don't say where she was, Umayeni. But he had two girlfriends. He had them as girlfriends at the same time. They might not have been the only girlfriends. He continues to say, at that time, remember, he's calling them his wives, Amakoska's army, you know. And then he says, but at that time, I had not paid lobola for any of them. So neither is MaCele kanye noma Saula had been lobolad at the time. And then he says, then I went and I paid lobola for MaCele first, and then MaSaule remained as a girlfriend for a short while. And then after that, he said, after being married to MaCele for a few days, guys, he got married to MaCele, and then after a few days he went and paid lobola for MaSaule. You guys, you can only imagine how that feels like as a wife when you are not even able to enjoy your honeymoon, whether you go away for your honeymoon to enjoy your honeymoon or not, or you just at your house. But if you marry a man, at least you want to spend a few months with this man before they go lobola another woman. So you can already see that that could have caused a conflict. Also, I wonder, you guys, how MaSaule made a decision on who was going to be lobolwa at first, because remember, MaSaule had always said he was looking for a wife that would support him in taking his team, and MaCele has expressed she was the wife that did not support his team in the beginning. It took her time to accept MaSaule wanted the same, and she had to agree to that. Whereas MaSaule seemed like a wife, from what they say, seemed like a wife who did not have a problem with MaSaule taking his tembo, because if she could accept my girlfriend MaSaule while she was already a wife, even though she wasn't married yet. But to me that looks like MaSaule should have been the wife that was lobolo at first, because that was the wife that seemed to me like she would have supported MaSaule from the beginning to take his team. So he doesn't explain how that decision was made for him to say, I am going to pay lobola for MaCele and not MaSaule. Maybe he had met MaCele first before MaSaule, but that's what happened. He got married to MaCele a few days later. He went to lobola MaSaule. Remember now, when the introduction of MaSaule was solely for that season, it was solely for the purpose of making us understand why they were going to go to the gravesite MaSaule, whose gravesite was this, and why were they going to go there. So MaSaule was calling a meeting with his wives so that he could tell them, go to MaSaule at the gravesite. Whoever wanted to support him and come, or whoever has a reason, their own personal reasons to want to come to the gravesite, they could come. He calls a meeting. Obviously, MaCele at the time already lived at Sea Park. She comes to a meeting at Mzumbe. When they get there for a meeting, MaSaule starts explaining that that's what he wants to talk about. MaCele at that time, guys, remember, season 1 MaCele was not very friendly. I think that MaCele honestly has changed so much from season 1 to season 6 that I feel like she's one of those wives that actually watch themselves on the show, and based on how people respond to how she has behaved on the show, or she has showed herself on the show, she changes herself. And I feel like she has become extra nice in season 6, because really from the beginning MaCele besimthatha njengonkosikazi ongenayo inhliziyo enhle, ubengenaso isikhathi samanye amakhosikazi, ubengathandi umuntu. Okay, and this is one of the first scenes where you see MaCele not even caring about indaba kaMaSaule ukuthi kuzokhulunywa ngoMaSaule. In fact, she says kuleyo meeting leyo ukuthi had she known that the meeting was going to be about MaSaule, she wouldn't have come to that meeting. And she makes it clear ukuthi she's not interested really in what they're talking about, and she ends up not going to the gravesite. And the people that end up going is Uma Ngwabe kanye noma Khumalo. I do not know Umayeni whether she did not go in support of MaCele, but when she does a diary session, she says the thing is there is no fond feelings on her side for MaSaule, because they were never really close. At the time, they were not all living in Mzumbe, so they were not spending a lot of time together. So even when she passed, it said she passed, but it's not like she has any fond feelings for her, but she doesn't hate her. And she says that MaSaule has to understand their feelings for MaSaule are not going to be the same as his feeling for MaSaule. Uma Ngabe yena goes merely to support MaSaule. She says she never met MaSaule, but MaSaule knew about her, but they had not been formally introduced to each other. So she says to MaSaule, Mina, I am here to support whatever it is that you want. So she goes merely to support MaSaule when going to the gravesite. However, Khumalo is the only wife that is very emotional about the situation. You guys, like I always say, Khumalo doesn't get very emotional about anything except issue MaSaule. She gets very emotional about the situation, and she ends up being one of those people that go to the gravesite. And obviously at that visit, she's very emotional as well. It's very hard for her to hold back tears when they are at the gravesite. Okay, in that episode, Ubaba MaSaule does say MaSaule, it's interesting to me that the way that he speaks about MaSaule in that season is the same way that he speaks about Khumalo, not MaCele this season. He says MaSaule was very instrumental in the success of Isthembu sakamSeleko. He says that had it not been for MaSaule, whatever dream that he had, Isthembu wouldn't have been successful. He is very clear in that, and that for me makes it very interesting, you guys. Of course, you guys, as isikhathi sihamba, of course, even though we don't have the actual timelines ukuthi MaSaule ushone after how long, after kukhokhwe ilobolo for her. They don't give us those timelines, but we know that at some point MaSaule she passes, you guys. She passes away, and it's unfortunate because she leaves behind a son that for years we didn't know about until this season, you guys. She passes away. Whatever happens, but we are not informed on the show. Now we are in season 6. They are introducing us to Lungelo. First, they introduce us to the idea of Lungelo, that he exists, and then he comes to the show, and that raises so many questions for us because we are wondering who this boy is and where this boy has been. Okay, so there is a lot of it makes the show a little bit more interesting because there's a lot of things that we look back to now. We understand better, but there's a lot of things that we look back to that makes us question things even more. Now, you guys, one of the questions that I have been having in my head is, how does MaCele feel about ingane kaMaSaule, knowing how she feels about MaSaule? You know, does she know about the child? I guess it's likely that she knows, but what feelings does she have for MaSaule's son? Okay. But more than that, you guys, the upset MaCele seems to be too much. I feel like there is something that we probably don't know, and it makes us do a guessing game in a way. Okay, if you come from a black family and you have any or you have seen or have any experience in terms of isithembu, you guys, or even if you don't have isithembu, we've seen families that have isithembu, even though you might not be part of it, it might not be part of your family. One thing, you guys, that is very common emdenini yesithembu is the issue of yokunukana when someone dies. It's like esithenjini, someone cannot just die, you know. Esithenjini, someone cannot just get sick. Someone cannot just get in a car accident. If anything like that happens esithenjini, there is always somebody that people are going to be pointing their fingers at to say it's probably that person that did something for this person to die, you know, or for this person to get injured, or for this person to be sick. Kuhlezi kunukwana esithenjini, you know. So when somebody dies, the people in that side of the family are going to probably bazonuka umuntu la esithenjini. So you have to think about this scenario where MaCele kanye noMaSaule bagane kaMaSaule all at the same time. There were probably questions of why MaCele elotsholwa kuqala kunoMaSaule, but at the same time there is also intention yokuthi right after I get married so kuyokhokha ilobola for MaSaule. She didn't even get to enjoy her honeymoon because few days later the abakhongi bebephuma beyolobola MaSaule. Okay, now MaSaule gets in a car accident, you know, when she is married to somebody that has 4 other wives. Okay, she gets in a car accident, she dies, you guys. nothing is as traumatic as or tragic as somebody dying in a car accident, because they are not sick. Nobody is expecting that something like that is gonna happen, and it can make people think all sorts of things. It makes me wonder, you guys, if umndeni wakamSele did not think maybe or banuke la esithenjini ukuthi mhlawumbe the reason uMaSaule eshonile is because of abanakwabo balaphayana emzini, nanokuthi were there not things that were said mhlambe about uMaCele at the time, mhlambe abantu benuka nje ukuthi kungenzeka yini ukuthi uMaCele othakathile or uMaCele wenze something for ukuthi kwenzeke or kuze uMaSaule adlule emhlabeni. It's a reality, you guys. Even not esithenjini as black people, kuyanukwa noma kusuke kushona umuntu, there's always somebody that is suspected of having done something for somebody to die. So I wonder if in that situation there wasn't anything like that, where maybe they suspected that uMaCele had done something to lead to MaSaule's death, which maybe is the reason for why uMaCele has been this upset so many years after uMaSaule has died. She's just not over it. So it makes me feel like maybe there were things that umndeni wakaSaule said, or maybe they suspected that something had been done to cause the death MaSaule, you guys. At the time when the storyline is actually introduced, it's very interesting, guys, to know ukuthi there were people even on Twitter that wrote ukuthi they felt like uMaCele might have done something to cause ilokhuzana ukushona kukaMaSaule. You know, izinto eziko on Twitter, you cannot take them seriously because of Twitter, but there were tweets that were saying no, people should have looked deeper into uMaCele because of her attitude when MaSaule is talking about uMaSaule. If your attitude is like that while they talk about somebody that has passed, it was suspicious for a lot of people on Twitter. But this is Twitter, we cannot take it serious. But the fact that there are people out there that can think that, it means that even for within a family, it's a possibility that some people thought that. So I feel like a little bit it might be explaining an attitude kaMaCele. Why has she been so upset for so many years after this woman has died? You guys, maybe there were things that were said, maybe people were suspicious about certain things that led to the death of uMaSaule, you guys, and that's why for her, she has erased her from her life. She doesn't care about anything that has to do with uMaSaule, and I can bet you that if she doesn't care about uMaSaule beyond the grave, she probably doesn't care much about ingane kaMaSaule. Now, you guys, when it comes to uLungelo kanye naye ubaba uMsele, their relationship, you guys, now ubaba uMsele is at a point where he has lost a wife has passed, he is left with a stepson, and but he still has other wives who are at the time also having children, and he takes the son back to kaSaule. They take the son because obviously he's not the biological father. And in the next season, they do show us a preview where he talks about the fact that they were excluded by the family yakaSaule when it comes to taking care of uLungelo, and maybe even that for us is an indication that there were issues. If benuka one of your wives, maybe she had a hand in what happened to ingane yabo, they're obviously not gonna want you to have contact with the son. You know, if they think something happened kaMsele that caused uMaSaule to die the way that she did, then they're probably not gonna let you have a hand in raising the son. At the same time, you guys, if there was tension already between MaCele and MaSaule, it would have been very difficult for Ubaba uMsele to be able to have contact with uLungelo, to continue having contact with uLungelo, because I guess he just decided to work on the relationships that he already had, like Kaya, the wives that he already had, like Kaya. Now, if MaCele had tension with or really hated MaSaule, because it seemed that way, you guys, he really hated MaSaule, how is Ubaba MaSaule going to say to MaCele, I'm going to see Ulungelo? Why would you go and see Ulungelo when you have your own sons here? We've given you your own sons, you have your own children here. Why would you want to go and see Ulungelo? I really, you guys cannot decide honestly to say Ubaba MaSaule really didn't try. I think he didn't try to see Ulungelo. I can accept that. But I feel like the reasons behind it, the possibilities are a lot, you guys, because at the end of the day, it wasn't his biological child. I think what I have an issue with is just the fact that they never really told him that, because at least it would have made things easy. Like he said, Ulungele, that MaSaule left a very confused young man. He left him a very confused young man, and I totally understand that. I just wish that they would have told him, even when on his way to the funeral, and say, boy, actually I am not, because I'm sure they already knew that the tension was there, because usually when somebody passes, the time leading to the funeral is where people are talking about, you know, what they're suspecting, ubano thakathile, ubano bulele bani, and all of that. They probably knew ukuthi there was going to be tension. I wish somebody had taken the time to just tell the boy that, listen, I am not your biological father. Your father will probably come check on you, or will probably take over and take care of you, but I can't, because I'm not your biological father. But I cannot confirm for sure what the reasons were for her to not follow up on that relationship. But I do imagine that it would have been very difficult, you guys, for him to follow up on that relationship with Ulungelo if MaCele was as angry as she is right now, because she is as angry as she was I guess before Ulukuzana MaSaule passed. All of the assumptions and all of the thoughts that we give on these videos are based on what we see on TV, you guys. But I do feel like there's a lot of things that we probably are not they're not revealing to us, especially when it comes to the passing of MaSaule. I would love to just know everything, but they're probably not gonna give us everything. That is why I feel like it was such a big risk for them to bring on Ulungelo, because I do feel like there are things that they are not ready to reveal to us when it comes to the passing of MaSaule, you guys. The passing and the timing of the passing of MaSaule, there's a lot of questions there, and I feel like the family is not ready to reveal it to us. And I think that in them being so desperate for a storyline, they forgot that if they bring Ulungelo on, they're going to raise a lot of questions, especially about his mom, because not only is he going to be looking for answers, but we are going to be looking for answers as if it's our family. But yes, I don't think that they calculated well the risk of actually bringing Ulungelo to the show. For us, it's like a gold mine, honestly, because there's so much to discuss, there's so much to ask questions about. But I imagine for Ulungelo, it opens wounds, because just because they chose to do this whole thing on the show, I don't know if he was aware that him coming to the show, we were going to be talking about him for the next 5 weeks or even 10 weeks. I don't know if he really, even for him, that it is a calculated risk to come on the show, because I do feel like there are benefits to it. But anything that has to do with the death of your mother, I imagine how much of wounds that opens. So I do feel like MaSaule probably didn't really calculate well when it comes to the risk, because there's so much now that they might be forced to reveal. The safest thing for them to do right now would be just to remove that meeting of Ulungelo, and Makumalo be the last meeting that we ever see of Ulungelo. It would just be for them to forget about that storyline until now we forget that there was ever Ulungelo. But I think that if they continue doing the scenes, then it's risky for them, because we're going to continue asking questions, because I do think that there is a lot that went on when it comes to Historis Kalungelo. Let's not forget, you guys, that like I said that when MaCele got married a few days later, MaSaule, it's the same story it's a similar story with Umayeni finding out that MaCele is getting married while yena ulinde ukuthi ayolotsholwa. So there's a lot of those stories that are quite interesting to hear about, but it's like siwezwa by accident on this show, and they never really go in and explain them to us. Guys, this show is like a gold mine, but I think it would be even better if they were revealing more when it comes to their lives. A lot of the things that we're finding out, it's almost like we're finding out by accident, and because they don't have the editing control, the producers are deciding to keep those things on the show, which makes us have some content to talk about. But I do feel like if they had control, there's certain things that we wouldn't have found out this season. I don't know, you guys, if I'm hoping Lungelo comes back or he doesn't come back, because Gigabili, sometimes I feel like, is it worth it for him to come back or not? Because I do feel like he's being used by the MaSaule family. But at the same time, I feel like there are things that are going to be clarified to us if he comes back to the show. So I'm still in the middle in terms of whether I want him to come back or not. I change my mind so many times, even in one day, when I think about that particular issue. Anyway, you guys, there's so much that we can talk about when it comes to this issue. The kind of things that the people are talking about and suggesting when it comes to the passing of MaSaule. Hey, I would get into trouble if I mention them, but a lot of them make sense to even question certain things when it comes to that passing, but we will leave it at that for now. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Please like it before Pumegiona, share it with your friends, with your family, and even with strangers. Ntando kakhulu.